It was Christmas Eve, 1945. The Sodder family home stood warm against the cold Appalachian night. Stockings hung, laughter fading into sleep, 10 children safe in their beds. By morning, the house was ash, and 5 of those children were gone. No bodies, no screams, no remains. Officials called it a tragic fire, but George and Jenny Sodder believed otherwise. To them, the blaze was no accident, but a veil for something far more sinister. And for the rest of their lives, they searched, not for closure, but for the truth. Tonight, we follow the trail of vanished children, hidden clues and whispers that still echo through the Appalachian hills. Did 5 young lives truly vanish in the flames, or were they stolen into the dark? Christmas Eve, 1945. The Sodder home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, was alive with celebration that night. George and Jenny Sodder, Italian immigrants, had built a good life. Their 10 children filled the house with warmth and noise. On Christmas Eve, 5 of them, Maurice, Martha, Louie, Jenny, and Betty, asked to stay up late, ages 5 to 14. Jenny agreed. They tended the animals, played by the fire, and promised to sleep in the attic afterward. Just after midnight, the house grew quiet, but at 12:30 a.m., the phone rang. Jenny Sodder answered. A woman's voice asked for someone who didn't live there. Then laughter, clinking glasses, and the line went dead. Uneasy, Jenny noticed the lights still on, the door unlocked, the curtains open, but she assumed the children had simply forgotten before heading to bed. At 1 a.m., Jenny woke again. This time, smoke, flames spreading from George's office. George, Jenny, and 4 of the children escaped, but the staircase to the attic was already engulfed. The other 5 were trapped above. George smashed a window, cutting himself badly. He tried everything. He ran for the family ladder. Gone. He tried to move his trucks against the house to climb. Both refused to start. The fire spread too fast. The local fire department didn't arrive until morning. By then, the Sodder home was a shell of cinders and ash. Authorities said the 5 missing children had perished in the flames, but when the ashes were sifted, nothing remained. Not a single bone, not a single tooth. The fire left a scar, but what it didn't leave were answers. When dawn came and the ashes cooled, investigators expected to find bones, teeth, even fragments, but there was nothing. Not a trace of 5 children who should have been trapped in that attic. Authorities explained it away. They said the fire had burned so hot, so long, it destroyed everything. But Jenny Sodder knew better. She tested it herself. She fed bones into her wood stove. Chicken bones, beef bones, pig bones. Each time, something remained. Charred, yes, but still there. Even bodies burned in house fires, she learned. Left fragments, vertebrae, teeth, skull pieces. Not nothing. Never nothing. This was the first clue that what should have been there wasn't. Then came the ladder. A simple wooden ladder, always leaning against the house. George used it daily. That night when the flames rose, he ran to grab it. Gone. Vanished. Without it, he couldn't reach the attic windows. Days later, it turned up. Not in the yard, not by the house, but thrown down a steep embankment, hidden from sight, as if someone had wanted it out of reach. Next, the trucks. Hours earlier, they had been running perfectly. George used them for his hauling business, always careful with maintenance. But in the frantic minutes of the fire, when he tried to back them against the house, neither would start. One, then the other. Dead. Silent. When mechanics examined them afterward, they found no mechanical failures, no drained batteries, no faulty wiring. Both had been tampered with or disabled in ways no one could prove. And then, the phone line. Investigators first claimed it had been destroyed in the flames, but when a repairman inspected it, the truth came out. The line hadn't burned. It had been cut from outside the house. Someone had climbed the pole in the night and sliced it clean, hours before the fire. Even before that Christmas Eve, strange warnings had haunted the Sodders. A drifter looking for work once pointed at their fuse boxes and muttered, "That'll cause a fire one day." Another man, an insurance salesman, stormed away after George refused him. His words burned colder than any ember. "Your house will go up in smoke. Your children will be destroyed." He spat out one more threat, that George would pay for insulting Mussolini. Because George Sodder wasn't just a family man, he was an immigrant who despised fascism, and he spoke against it loudly. In Fayetteville, a small town with a close-knit Italian community, those words made enemies. Enemies who never forgot. And then, the phone call. Just after midnight, before the fire began, Ginny had answered the ringing telephone. A woman's voice, slurred, mocking, asking for someone who didn't live there. Laughter in the background, the sound of glasses clinking. A party, perhaps, or something darker. Moments later, the line went dead, and less than an hour after, the house was burning. One by one, the details piled up. No bones, a missing ladder, trucks that refused to start, a phone line cut clean, threats, warnings, a call that made no sense. Taken alone, each could be explained away. But together, they formed a picture not of tragedy, but of design. What became of the Sodder children that Christmas Eve? The truth was never found, but the theories remain, each one a doorway into shadows. The first and most convincing theory is this: the fire was never meant to kill. It was meant to distract, to cover something far more sinister, the abduction of 5 children. Look at the evidence. The ladder moved, the phone line cut, the trucks disabled. Each detail carefully designed to stop George Sodder from reaching his children, to trap him in helplessness. Why revenge? George was no ordinary man in Fayetteville. He was loud, outspoken, and unafraid to denounce Mussolini in a town where loyalties to the dictator still lingered among Italian immigrants. He made enemies, and enemies remember. If the kidnapping theory is true, the Sodder children were not victims of fire, but pawns in a message meant for their father. A warning written not in words, but in smoke. A darker branch of the kidnapping theory leads to organized crime. The Mafia. Their reach in the 1940s was wide, even in small Appalachian towns, and they thrived on intimidation. Some believe George either crossed them or refused them. Perhaps he turned down protection. Perhaps he angered the wrong man. And the Mafia does not forgive. Taking the Sodder children would have been a statement, a way of saying, silence or suffer. The threats George received, the hostility he faced, the cold dismissal of police afterward. To some, these are fingerprints of influence, of power that ensured no real investigation was ever pursued. Witnesses claimed to see the children in cars that night or at diners the next day, always with strangers, always silent. If those reports were true, the Mafia may have hidden them in plain sight, raised them under new names, identities erased. Did the Sodder children grow up never knowing who they were? Did they live entire lives as ghosts in other families? It is a chilling thought. Others take it further still. They believe the Sodder children were swept into something larger, a child trafficking ring that stretched beyond West Virginia. This theory explains the sluggish police work, the bizarre disinterest in pursuing leads, the fire department arriving hours too late. If corruption reached into local law enforcement, then the Sodders never stood a chance. Eyewitnesses reported children resembling the Sodders at roadside diners, at tourist stops, even in the company of strangers who would not let them speak. One woman swore she saw them at breakfast, hushed by two Italian men who ordered for them. If true, the children were alive, just not free. George and Jenny feared this theory most, because if it was true, their children were not gone. They were suffering. And then comes the harshest theory of all, that the Sodder children did perish in the fire, that George and Jenny simply could not bear it. Grief makes the mind do strange things. When answers are unbearable, it invents others. Some believe the missing bones were simply overlooked in the ashes, that the sightings were rumors, that the mysterious photograph sent decades later was nothing more than a cruel hoax. In this view, the Sodder mystery is not one of crime, but of the human heart refusing to accept death. To these skeptics, the story is a tragedy made worse by hope. But some theories stray beyond reason, into the realm of folklore, into whispers that linger in the Appalachian hills. Stories told by miners long before the Sodders built their home spoke of voices in the woods, of fires that consumed without killing, of children taken by forces unseen, taken not into death, but into somewhere else. A folklorist once remarked that the Sodder land lay near ground considered sacred and dangerous by indigenous peoples, places where reality bends thin. Could the fire have been something unnatural? A doorway? A curse? For those who believe, the Sodder children were not lost to men, but to something older, something that feeds on confusion, on grief, on fire. 5 theories, 5 possible truths, and yet nearly 80 years later, no proof, no resolution, only shadows, and in those shadows, the Sodder children remain. Some stories fade with time. The Sodder children never did. The fire may have burned in 1945, but its smoke still drifts through American memory. And in that smoke, 5 faces remain, young, smiling, frozen in photographs that never aged. George and Jenny Sodder never stopped searching. For decades, they chased every lead, every rumor. They hired private investigators, mailed out flyers, drove across the country, chasing shadows. Their lives became a hunt for ghosts that might still be breathing. But their most enduring act wasn't the search, it was the billboard. Along Route 16, George erected a massive sign bearing the photographs of his missing children. It stood for over 40 years. Weathered, fading, but impossible to ignore. Thousands of travelers saw it. Some stopped to read, others to leave flowers, toys, or notes. It became a landmark, not to death but to doubt, a permanent refusal to accept the official story. The town whispered too. School children told each other the Sodder house was cursed ground. On Christmas Eve, some swore you could hear crying in the woods. Others claimed to see small figures in the fog along Route 16 waving silently at passing cars. Neighbors spoke of flickering lights in the ruins long after the fire. And one woman insisted she heard a child's voice call Mama from the forest a year later. She never walked past those woods again. And then came the photograph. Arriving by mail in 1968, it showed a young man. On the back, a cryptic note, Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie, Elil Boys, a 90132 or 35. The man bore an uncanny resemblance to Louis, one of the missing. George and Jenny believed it was him. Investigators dismissed it, but once seen, it could not be unseen. By the 1980s, the billboard was finally taken down. Jenny died in 1989, still wearing black each day of her life, still refusing to accept the lie. The land where the house once stood is now quiet. Grass grows where walls once burned, but some say the ground there is warm, warmer than it should be. And on still nights, the scent of smoke drifts through the air. With time, the Sodder mystery slipped from courtrooms and case files and into folklore, campfire stories, late-night whispers, internet forums, podcasts, documentaries. Each generation keeps the question alive. Why were no remains ever found? Who cut the phone line? Who threatened George? And who was the man in that photograph? The Sodder case has become more than a crime story. It is a cultural wound, a reminder that truth can vanish, just as easily as 5 children on Christmas Eve. The Sodder children never came home, and maybe they never will. But their story remains in the ashes, in the whispers, in the silence of a Christmas Eve that never ended. Was it fire? Was it revenge? Or something older, hiding in the dark? What do you believe really happened that night in 1945? Were the Sodder children claimed by flame or stolen into shadows? Share your theory in the comments. We'd love to hear your voice in the echo of this mystery. Thank you for walking through the shadows with us tonight. If this story held you, share it with someone who still listens to the dark. And don't forget to subscribe for more haunted histories, lost voices, and whispered truths. This is Whims and Whispers, where silence speaks and shadows remember.